let me do that. And then do you want me to announce? And we'll start the recording. Are we good to stream out, Ian?
All set.
All right. I'm going to start the recording now.
All righty. And can you do the whole introduction rigmarole, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. It is August 18th at 4 o'clock, and this is the Cape Cod Regional Government Assembly of Delegates Standing Committee on Economic Affairs. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this virtual meeting of the Barnstable County Assembly of Delegates Standing Committee on Economic Affairs will be conducted via remote means only in accordance with applicable law. Members of the public may watch the meeting through live real-time broadcast at www.youtube.com/user/Barnstable County, all one word. A public participation guide and meeting documents are available in advance at www.capecod.gov. The County of Barnstable does not discriminate in the administration of its programs or activities on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or other category protected by state and federal anti-discrimination laws and regulations. Reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities are available upon request. For more information or to file a complaint, please contact Justina Marchak, Barnstable County ADA Non-Discrimination Coordinator at jmarczak@capecod.gov. Call 508-375-6646 or visit www.capecod.gov. Members of the public may also attend the meeting remotely through Microsoft Teams. And again, you can find all the information to do that at www.capecod.gov in the meeting center. I believe that's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I don't know if I printed an old agenda, but mine says August 13th at 3.
Could be, I'm sure. But
so, meeting is called to order. Opening ceremonies. So may I have a moment of silence to honor our troops who have died in service to our country and all those serving our country around the world and at home. Thank you. May we now do the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now may we have the roll call, Mr. Clerk?
all right, Madam Chair. Deputy Speaker Gasson? Deputy Speaker?
Here.
All right. Dean Oman does not look like he is here yet. Delegate Ty?
Here.
Chair Harder?
Here.
Vice Chair Warner?
Here.
And you do have Delegate Gallagher here as an alternate for Delegate Oman in case he does not join. So,
all right, so keep that in mind, Terry. And also Delegate Gallagher doesn't put us over quorum or 51%. So as an alternate Delegate Gallagher, you're still welcome to speak up should you. All righty. So we're starting with a presentation on the luxury real estate tax and the working group ideas. So I will call on Administrator Dutton if he is ready for us.
Well, I don't know if I'm ever really ready, but I will certainly contribute something to the group. So thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to sort of introduce the discussion by letting you know that the working group is obviously ongoing. We've had a couple of meetings so far. We try to limit the length of time that we spend on these meetings so that we can really condense and get some positive work done. But I will say our work is ongoing, as I had promised the assembly a long time ago. As we sort of gel ideas, we will bring those ideas to the assembly. In this case, it's going to the Economic Affairs Committee, which is completely appropriate. But I did want to preface what I say by letting you know that portions of what I'm going to say and portions of what I wrote in the memo that you got earlier today are sort of my procedural guidance based on some of the limited discussion that we've had within the working group. So I just didn't want to place the burden or the glory or any of that on the working group, as they are a group of pretty hardworking individuals that are just providing sort of either a sounding board or providing some creative ideas to solve some housing issues. So that said, I know that there's been some discussion amongst delegates over the last month or two on the potential for creating what's referred to as a real estate transfer fee. I am familiar with a real estate transfer fee for other reasons. Primarily Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard have transfer fees to support the purchase and preservation of open space. They do not have housing, a similar transfer fee for housing, however, although that has been in the works, I think, for a number of years on both the islands. In Barnstable County, we've never, as far as I know, there's been some discussion over the years, but never any concerted effort to try to secure through the legislature any kind of transfer fee. So I thought what I would do is just take a little bit of time, sort of set the groundwork for why this might be an option that the assembly should consider, and then give you a little bit of an idea of the process you would need to go through in order to adopt something like it. So first of all, sort of the rationale. Obviously, we're facing a pretty, and let me stop for a minute. If anybody has any questions, just feel free. It's a small group, so feel free to scream out, and I'll do my best to answer the question, or punt to somebody that actually knows the correct answer. So, but do interrupt me if you have a question. So just in terms of rationale for why this is being discussed, obviously there are a lot of small things that the working group is in the process of discussing that try to tackle some parts of the housing issue that we have on the Cape. Much of it is potentially doable, but all of it requires some degree of funding. Whether we like it or not, it requires some kind of degree of funding. And so this is a mechanism that could secure a stream of funding, somewhat consistent stream of funding over the long haul, and not be reliant on the legislature, not be reliant on local taxation in order to continue that funding. So that's sort of the rationale for why I'm discussing this now. We want to be as efficient as possible with how a funding mechanism gets implemented. So the real estate transfer fee really is a very efficient way to do it. It creates a revenue stream by charging a very small percentage. Again, this percentage is a political question, up to the assembly to sort of determine what a reasonable percentage is on what I call high value or high end real estate transactions. Again, that's a chore for the assembly to sort of figure out and define what high end is. Is it over $1 million? Is it over $2 million in terms of transfer and house sale? That's something that the assembly can sort of sort out over the coming weeks and months. So it's only charged to the buyer on a high-end real estate transaction. And so you can certainly argue that it's not going to be impactful for the folks that are just looking for workforce housing. And that's sort of a different market. So that market isn't adversely impacted directly. So the idea would be, okay, create this fund or create this real estate transfer fee. Where does it go? We would then be creating a regional fund, something I think I refer to as Cape Cod. What did I? Well, I referred to it as something just to give it a name in my memo, but it create a fund, and that's something that the assembly and the commissioners would have to do by ordinance, which could be used for some kind of region to pay for some kind of program, whether it's money goes back to the towns directly. And the county acts as just sort of a collector and a holder of the funds, and those funds get distributed back to the towns from which the fee came. Or again, this is discussion for the assembly to take up at some point. Or is there a regional approach, and should some or all or some of that funding be constrained and kept within the fund to pay for regional programming? So that is again, that's something that is best figured out by the assembly, and those are political discussions, and I've been very clear that we want to make sure that we're giving you as much process information and as much practical information as possible, so that then you can have a rational political discussion about the future of potential real estate transfer fee. So what the transfer fee does, it creates this predictable funding source, and that predictable funding source actually can also help help to supplement state and federal resources, especially where their grant funding, where grant funds are available, but require some sort of local match. So you've developed a fund. It can be sizable enough to secure potentially secure more state and federal funding. Again, making every effort to not impact the real estate tax-paying residents of the Cape. So that's sort of the focus. So let me just give you sort of very quickly, and then I'll open it up to any kind of question. Give you a sense of how you implement something like this. Where this is part of the process, this meeting. But ultimately, the Assembly of Delegates would adopt a home rule petition that would request of the legislature authority for Barnstable County to impose the fee, apply exemptions. If you look at land bank legislation on the islands, you'll see that there's exemptions for family transfers, there are certain government transactions, court order transfers, otherwise deed restricted, affordable housing exemption, bankruptcy exemptions. There are a whole host of exemptions that don't occur on a regular basis, but certainly are there. So those are pretty standard. So then the legislation would also give the county the right to establish a year-round housing trust. That's the name I gave it. My apologies. A year-round housing trust that would be the bucket into which those revenues could flow and collect. You would, again, a political decision, but it's very possible that you'd want to include language that allows communities to either opt in, apologies, allow those communities to either opt in or opt out as they desire. Obviously, for the communities that opt in, the transfer fees for those communities, if you so choose, would be distributed to those communities and not to the communities that choose to opt out. So I guess that's sort of step one. That's the home rule petition, And I will say that there's a fair amount of work for the assembly to do to sort of tackle some of those political issues. You know, what's the percentage? What would be your recommended percentage rate on transfers? What would the threshold be? Would it be something house sales over $1 million or over $2 million? And then how would you want those funds to be distributed? Just all of the funds heading out directly to the towns, or would you want the county to sort of retain a percentage of those in order to tackle some of the regional issues or tackle housing issues on a regional basis? So that's sort of the home rule petition. Then there's a step for the county to take, and certainly that's by ordinance, and that would you would need an ordinance to formally establish. Once the legislature's given you the opportunity to do it, you'd need an ordinance to create that year-round housing trust. And again, you know, according to what the legislation is, you'd sort of define what the obligations are of the year-round housing trust, and you do that by ordinance. There's a lot of detail that goes into that, so I kind of won't bore you with some of that. But obviously that year-round housing trust would be a public, you know, transparent process. Everybody would know the money coming in, where it's coming from, how it's getting expended, and so that housing trust would have to report just like any other municipal entity or county entity would be required to report. So that is sort of it in a nutshell. I guess I would focus, you know, just leave you with a couple of bullet points. The transfer fee, as you know, and as sort of articulated and anticipated, would apply to those high-end sales. It makes no sense to burden you know, workforce housing folks or others looking at that sort of lower market, which is now lower market. But makes no sense to try to burden the very people that you're trying to help with a transfer fee. So you're trying to target the people that arguably are causing some of this housing escalation in generating some kind of fee to offset the adverse impact that's causing. So, but the highlight again, you know, I don't think I'm proposing to do anything that the towns wouldn't agree with. I think there's a lot of discussion that needs to go on among the town boards, select boards, planning boards, and so forth, to see if this is something that the county should endeavor to do. If there's no, you know, honestly, I've said this many times about many other issues, if there's no appetite for any kind of regional effort in certainly in housing or in any other thing we do, then there's not a reason for us to get into that. So I guess in terms of next steps for this committee, I think, you know, look at this sort of two-step legislative framework, the housing, the transfer fee at the legislature level in Boston, and then the ordinance piece, which is more local for the county. Make decisions about what that percentage rate should be on the sale of properties. And then decide, you know, what's being exempt. Is it properties under 1 million? Is it properties under 2 million? And then go out and have discussions with your respective towns and see if there's an appetite for it. And then if there is, and you want to move forward, I'm happy to help draft you know, that home rule petition that would be required to be filed with the legislature. And obviously we can also work on drafting an appropriate ordinance along the lines of what we've discussed, or something different, if that's the desire of the committee. So So that's it in a nutshell. I've given you a whole lot very, very quickly. But if you have any questions, feel free to scream and yell.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for that. And I know it was slightly delayed, but I hope everyone has a chance to read the memo if you haven't already, because it's very clear and lays things out. I believe Delegate Gessen had a question.
Thank you, Chair Harder. I had two questions, and then you can get back to me if there's another chance to ask another one. I thank you, Administrator Dutton, for your presentation on this. First, just clarifying question. I know the memo lays out the process as a step 1 and a step 2 for the housing trust, but is there any reason we couldn't essentially move them in parallel and not wait for the legislature to create a year-round housing trust? I know a lot of towns already have them, and it's effectively create what would be a stabilization fund for housing.
Nope, I think there's nothing that precludes that. In fact, I would make that recommendation regardless of whether or not the county moves forward with a petition to the legislature for the year-round or for the real estate transfer fee. I think there is some value in creating a fund. You mentioned stabilization fund. That's essentially what it would be. But creating that fund and looking for alternate ways to fund it. It probably initially wouldn't be receiving the amount of funding that a real estate transfer fee would give it, but certainly there's value in having segregated funds over the long term. And so, short answer to your question is yes. I think it makes sense to plow ahead with the ordinance and not necessarily wait for the legislature to act.
Awesome, thank you. And then second question. I know you've been a little vague in the presentation today, just because you're covering so much in terms of what these funds could be used for and what towns have been using these funds for. And hopefully some of our presenters from the islands might be able to touch on those topics too later on. But am I correct in understanding that, some of your vagueness is because you want to leave it more for the assembly to deliberate this rather than because, these things haven't been given enough thought?
No, I could give you my thoughts and we'd be here forever, but I do think that the use of the funds really is a political question. That's for an elected board. Obviously, this is an elected committee of an elected board, and so I think those are how precisely we use those funds is the political question. I think over the course of the next several months, the working group will have some ideas to give the assembly and thoughts to give the assembly, but I don't at this early stage. I wouldn't presuppose that there's a specific and recommended way to expend those funds right now. I mean, I normally would not come to you and say, look, we need money. We're not sure what we want to do with the money, but we need money. In this case, I think it's very clear and very obvious that there are housing issues that we need to address, and addressing those, certainly zoning changes can be one way to address that's low cost, not necessarily universally palatable, but most of the other changes, certainly changes that are outlined in the Cape Cod Commission's housing report, require some level of funding. So that's my thought on that one.
Thank you.
All right, Delegate Warner.
Thank you. First of all, Administrator Dutton, thank you so much for the kind of very detailed outline of the things that really need to be addressed in order to move forward. I agree with you that this is at the early stages, and it's so important that the way in which this gets moved is done very carefully, because several factors are in play. One, there is obviously a fee attached to some people that would be an issue for some and maybe not for any. But there also is the idea that this is so out of the box, so to speak, for how the county has approached ways in which they've tried to bring in additional funds in order to support efforts that would give better services to the regional community. I think it's interesting that the state legislature has not moved on any of the individual town proposals that have been put forward, but I think a part of that may have to do with the fact they'd rather have a regional one than 15 individual ones, which would all be different and have no kind of structure whatsoever that would potentially move a seamless resolve for a very critical issue. I like the idea of a trust. That I don't know. I've always liked the idea of trusts, but I think that that's a really smart and a very very good way of trying to approach what we do with this. I also wonder, and in some ways, in some of the things that you've suggested, there seems to be additional levels that have come in that could be considered, and one of those also might be, well, if it's going to be regionalized, and you still would like to have the communities that do participate in it have some kind of resolve for it. Is there a different way? I mean, if it's not like saying, okay, everybody, you get back the money you put in, or everybody, is there some kind of way that it could be regionalized, but still maybe give, if communities were to support so many new homes or so many new rentals or whatever, that there might be a way to reward them a little bit from this same pot that would make them a little bit more incentivized in order to move it forward. I don't know if that's legal. I don't know if it's appropriate, but I think that I'm a little concerned about suggesting that we give back to the communities that give so much in the same amount, because once again, it potentially could move the regional momentum in a way that we would not like to see happen. It's not that we're trying to segregate this or do anything like that. We're simply trying to make housing available for people who desperately need it, and to make it in a way that it benefits the entire region. So I'm wondering if you might consider, or even bring that to your committee and ask them what they think about how might there be, if it was kept as a regional thing. Okay, so let's say we raise 10 million arbitrarily, and instead of just saying, okay, for each group that brought in so much money, they get that back to try to put into their own community. They might not have all the resources to do what they need to do, but in a regional approach, there could be an added advantage that, okay, if we do this one now, and then we do this one in this community next, and we work collectively as a group, that there could be greater financial advantages for that purpose. And I'm looking for that hook, I guess, because I think that might be very helpful when it's time to go to each of the communities and present them with what more defined the final picture looks like. So thank you again. I appreciate your efforts.
Oh, thank you. And I think you do, you kind of hit the nail on the head with one of the issues, or one of the conversation pieces that I'm sure this committee will have later on, and I will bring that back to the committee and just see what their thoughts are on that, because I think personally, it's not the committee talking, but me, that there is room for some regional solutions. So how that pot of money gets spent is going to be the topic of a lot of future conversations, I'm sure. But your point is very well taken.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna just go to I don't see any Hands raised. Dan, Susan. Delegate Oman did not come, right? Delegate Ty, do you have any questions?
I'd like to thank Mr. Dutton for that very lengthy report that I was trying to keep up with you and write down and have some. I wasn't able to download the memo, but we've got some work to do. That's what I come up with. We've got work to do. But thank you, sir. Thank you.
We do.
I appreciate it.
We do indeed. So Owen, am I gonna get in trouble if I open, sorry, Mr. Clerk, will I get in trouble if I open this up to first, Delegate Gallagher, do you have any questions?
I have no questions at this point.
Or
I would
comments?
comment. I did hear from a member of my select board who reiterated the need for coordination with the towns. The Outer Cape towns have already petitioned the state government regarding the transfer fee, and she just wanted to make sure that everything was moving together. And frankly, from what I heard today from you, Mr. Dutton, thank you very much. I for one, am confident that that is happening, but I also need to reassure my select board members about that.
Nope, that's a good point. And I think actually, if I could, Madam Chair, I
Yes,
would only
please.
add that it would never be my intent to do something that a majority of the towns are not interested in. So certainly, you know, we have sort of regions on the Cape, obviously, and the Outer Cape, Lower Cape region. They have, I think, almost every town has submitted separate legislation, which is very similar, asking for this. So we would do. Obviously, in conjunction with those towns, we'd make sure that they understood what our intent is if it comes to pass that the committee and the assembly decide to move ahead with a petition.
Thank you. Anybody else want to chime in besides Dan? Because he gets to go only after other people. So does anybody else want to comment? All right, I see no one. In that case, Dan, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want to reiterate what Delegate Warner said in terms of regionalizing. I think we have a fantastic opportunity here to do, the kind of regional stuff that I think is sometimes lacking from our communities, especially when it comes to housing. I think regional coordination could be one of those secret game changers that could, move the ball forward a lot with towns working together, especially if there's a new source of funding. But of course, it's a touchier subject of having to tell towns that they have to share funds. But some communities, especially on the Outer Cape, have been discussing regionalizing their housing trusts for years, even with their home rule petitions being separate. So, Mr. Dutton, as you do your research on this, I'd be super curious to hear, even if there's a way to voluntarily include some of these communities in regional programs, like you did with the shared services office, where towns, volunteered to pitch in money to work together. I'm sure there would be a ton of potential. And I'd just be curious how we could craft a home rule petition that would make sure that's possible.
Nope, point well taken.
Okay, my turn. So, I just want to put a couple of things on the record from my opinion. One, I grew up in New York City, where the primary, other than rental, was, for most of my life, co-ops, not condos. And the way a co-op worked was, you're not buying your apartment, you're buying shares in a company that runs the buildings. And whenever you would sell an apartment, there would be the fee charged to the buyer because that would go to the, expenditures for the building. Helps with, because in a co-op, your rent is to pay for the organization, and they pay for the superintendent and any maintenance that needs to be done. And in fact, that's what it's called. It's not called rent, it's called maintenance. So this has been going on forever in New York City, and it's just business as usual. So I don't think that buyers are at a certain level, of course, are really going to have as much of a problem accepting it as perhaps people think they will, because it's standard. It's a standard way of doing real estate in many places. Just it's never been done on the Cape before. But as long as it's big enough money that the buyer is spending, I don't think it will be bad. The other thing that I'm thinking of is that I don't think we're asking the towns to give up their funds. I think their own funds, their own year-round housing funds, are going to be the way they, if we can agree on the transfer fee being collected by the county and going into the county fund, like the water protection fund, and then the towns go to the regional fund for project money, like the water fund works, then I think we can get people to agree. They're not shutting down their funds. That's going to be the way they use the county funds to implement their projects. So that's just something that I've been considering, that I think that's the way to get the towns to understand. If we don't have a regional source of money, there are going to be towns that make nothing because they don't have enough real estate to sell. There aren't going to be, or there are towns that don't have enough houses that are going to sell at the $1 or $2 million threshold that we set. But I think that as long as we're just saying we're collecting the money, but we're not going to tell you what to do with it. You just come to the fund when you need it instead of having your own. I think people will understand that that's equitable and probably within a lot of their interests. So those are just my opinions. Delegate Warner.
Thank you. Am I on?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah, your comments are well taken. I think one of the things we also need to consider as we move forward is that the messages we provide are clear and don't have a lot of inconsistencies in them. And I think that one of the most important messages that this idea presents is the idea that it's a future forward thinking way to solve a problem that has existed for a very long time. And the people who live in this area know that. They also know how long it has been that the prices have made it impossible for so many people who both live and try to work here are faced with. So I think that in the conversation, we have to put forward in a more front manner the idea that this is really cutting edge, and it's a way to solve a problem that for a very long time has been unsolvable. And every every community can be a part of it. Every person who goes to sell a home above a certain level can be a part of it. And it creates an avenue in which we can move the agenda forward for those people who really want to make the commitment to be on Cape Cod, and who really would take any opportunity to try to make that happen. So I think that sometimes we concentrate too much on the money and how's it going to be spent, and who's going to have the authority over it, and that's sometimes not really the answer. The answer, and one of the answers in this particular agenda is that the region has been stalled for so long because of the way in which it's tied in its fundraising efforts. And over the years, the county has tried to come up with solutions for adding new services, et cetera, or increasing services without having to go out and search for more money. But the truth is, this is a way to move forward, and it could be an idea which begins to generate some other ideas about how we might be able to address some of the issues we'd like to get into, that would bring additional monies in without violating the rules that we currently have to go forward. And I really would encourage people to not forget that it's the idea of getting people excited about being a part of a change, and part of a very important change, and being a part of that rhythm that could really help the region move forward in a lot of ways. So thank you.
Excellent points. I would like to move on to number 7, because we have guests here that so I would like to hear from our guests from Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, or anyone else who wishes to speak to the topic of a transfer fee. Is there? Hello. I thought I saw.
I am unable to raise my hand.
Oh,
It has been
okay.
disabled.
Hi, Laura.
Hi,
Please, thank you for joining us.
I'm happy
please
to be here.
Let us know your thoughts, please.
Sure. First of all, I just want to flag Dan that Tucker dropped off, and he's texting to say, can you resend him the link because he's having trouble getting back into the meeting.
All right.
Oh, I think Dan
We'll
froze.
figure it.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Okay. So I'm really here to answer questions and to give the background on where the islands are with this, because we first started filing for a real estate transfer fee for affordable housing in 2005. So it's been 20 years. There was a gap there for a while because the legislation didn't pass in the 2005 session, and then in 2016 Nantucket started refiling their home rule petition, and the Vineyard joined on early last session. So this is our second session filing. All of our 6 towns on Martha's Vineyard co-filed. So instead of a home rule petition, we have a 6-town joint bill filing called an Act Establishing the Martha's Vineyard Housing Bank. As Mr. Dutton mentioned, the state has actually already given seasonal communities, quote unquote seasonal communities, the ability to create a year-round housing trust fund via an intergovernmental agreement. So the original legislative filing that the Martha's Vineyard town sent in, the state has already granted us the ability to create a Martha's Vineyard housing bank through this intergovernmental agreement via the year-round housing trust, but there's no funding mechanism. So the towns here aren't really able to create this fund until there's a funding mechanism. So this iteration of an act establishing the Martha's Vineyard Housing Bank focuses on the transfer fee funding mechanism that was filed for last session, to try to push that forward so that the towns can co-fund a year-round housing trust fund.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments, people, for Laura? Sorry, for Miss Silber.
You can call me Laura, that's fine.
Deputy Speaker Gasson.
Hi, Ms. Silver. Thank you very much for coming today.
and taking the time to talk to us up here in Barnstable County. Out of curiosity, the legislation that's currently filed in Boston, is it an all or nothing for all 6 towns, or can individual towns choose to impose a transfer fee or not?
The way that the towns voted, and there was a vote across all 6 towns. So there was a town meeting vote and a ballot vote. 77% of the voters voted in favor of this joint legislation that said that it was all towns would have the opportunity to opt in, and that it would be a minimum in order to trigger the creation of the housing bank. It would be a minimum of 4 towns would have to vote yes to create the housing bank. Obviously, now we have the year-round housing trust fund option, so that's going to be done by an intergovernmental agreement. If a town chooses not to join, they would not be obligated to join. If a town chose to join and the year-round housing trust fund was created and the transfer fee was adopted, and then the town chose to drop out, there's also a procedure for the town voting to remove itself. So there, you're talking about complexities of funding, potentially bonding. So that's all been thought about of what that would look like and how long it would take for a town to extricate itself once it had paid off, whatever it had, owed the fund, if there was a partnership agreement or something like that. So there's a bit of complexity to it when you're talking about a 6-town or more than that agreement, but the towns hammered that out here. So we think we have a good working model.
Thank you. Anybody else? And if I don't see hands, and if you're having a problem raising your hand, please just yell at me.
Can I ask if everyone's clear on why the transfer fee is of such interest to the island towns?
Oh, please, any information you
okay.
have to share with us.
So, sure. So the Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket land banks were filed for and passed by the state legislature over 30 years ago. At the time, they were the only 2 transfer fees in the Commonwealth, followed shortly thereafter by the county deed excise fee for Barnstable County. These all passed within a very short period of time with each other, virtually unopposed, because the Mass Association of Realtors had not yet gotten organized to oppose these kind of transfer fees. In the intervening years, they have gotten organized and opposed them, and that is why we have not seen a transfer fee, a real estate transfer fee, pass in the Commonwealth since 30 years ago when those 3 funding mechanisms were created. Transfer fees are used widely in other states. There are 37 states that have some form of a transfer fee. Vermont has a statewide transfer fee that's used for conservation. Aspen, Colorado has funded the largest municipal inventory of deed-restricted housing in the United States. 1/3 of their year-round residents live in deed-restricted housing. They started that 30 years ago. They funded it largely via a transfer fee, a local transfer fee. The New York State Assembly proactively gave the Peconic towns and the Hamptons 2 years ago the ability to adopt a luxury transfer fee for affordable housing to add on to the transfer fee that they already collect for conservation. So similar to Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, the Hamptons was already collecting a transfer fee for conservation. Before they even asked for it, the New York State Assembly said, here, you're going to need this. You guys are in real trouble with housing. You need a flexible revenue stream that not only serves up to 80% AMI, but can also serve the missing middle, because they saw, a hemorrhaging of naturally occurring affordable and year-round housing inventory into the luxury market. And what we're seeing on Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket is no matter how quickly we build housing, we are losing our naturally occurring inventory faster than we are creating new inventory. And traditional state revenue streams and CPC funds are not flexible enough or sufficient enough to target preservation and adaptive reuse of existing inventory, because you're talking about smaller scale. So like small scale acquisitions of one house and converting into a 3-flat, or, a couple houses in tandem, or, a bed and breakfast that can then be converted into apartments. Those are really difficult projects to fund because the state revenue streams, as you probably know, really line up with these much larger projects. And particularly on the islands, we don't have enough available open land to be doing a lot of large projects. And unlike the Cape, we don't have storefronts and motels that aren't being used. We don't have large buildings that we can repurpose. So we're really looking at the need for infill development, for capturing and converting. And that preservation piece is really what we feel the transfer fee is going to be most critical for, because it's not tied to an AMI. So you can use it for over 100% AMI. You can also use it for year-round deed restrictions, which has been a hugely critical piece of the way Vail, Colorado has been protecting and preserving its existing inventory. They pioneered a program called the Vail In-Deed program. We now have the right to create similar programs in the seasonal communities, thanks to the seasonal communities designation. The guidance on that is going to be coming out in September, by the end of September. So we're waiting to see what the state guidance is going to look like for implementation, but we're very excited about that tool. And Nantucket, if my colleague is able to get back on, Tucker can speak to the pilot program that Nantucket is already putting together for a year-round deed restriction acquisition program. And Provincetown as well has a pilot program about to launch for a year-round deed restriction acquisition program. Another piece of this is the Lease to Locals program, which is running incredibly successfully in Provincetown and Nantucket already, and just launched here on the Vineyard in Chilmark. That is an incentive program that incentivizes the conversion of short-term rentals into year-round rentals. It is incredibly successful, super cost-effective, because $20,000 gets you a 1 year of a year-round rental converted from a short-term rental. Whereas putting units on the ground, we're looking at $500, $600, and on the islands, $800,000 per unit to just put one unit on the ground. So P-Town's converted, I think, 44 units in just the last calendar year. Nantucket, Tucker can speak to how many units they've converted. It's been hugely successful. They've got municipal employees in there, public service workers, firefighters, teachers, critical service workers in the community also. And it's something that we're really excited about. Again, that needs a flexible revenue stream. You can't use CPC funds to fund that, and you can't use state funds to fund that. Tucker, are you on? Would you like to add?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I mean, Laura, you touched on the Lease to Locals program on Nantucket. We now have roughly 70 homes that have joined that program. As Laura said, it's a great interim step, but it's not a final solution. And we've been deploying capital. Voters on Nantucket have been very generous. They've supported over $140 million toward housing efforts over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. Is a great start. We've been deploying those funds in a variety of different ways in terms of buying down affordability in already existing programs. We have funded 100% development of 22 rental units that are all restricted at various income levels, as Laura touched on. The state funding streams don't align with what our objectives were for that project. And frankly, they're also very competitive and can't move quickly enough, at least as far as we're concerned. So we also are using the funds, as Laura mentioned, for a new year-round deed restriction program that's being rolled out shortly, pending the guidance from EOHLC on the year-round deed restriction definition. But there already are folks raising their hand who are existing homeowners who I think see the value of having their property, much like folks who own larger tracts of land who wanted to see it go to conservation purposes. There are folks who have been longtime year-round residents who say, I want my legacy to be my home being part of the year-round family. So anyway, I can touch on anything else that's helpful. I know a lot of ground has been covered. When I first got on here listening to Michael, I'm like, Dan, you don't need Laura and I. Michael's got it all down pat, but happy to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you. I think what's helpful is hearing success stories and how you've managed. The fact that you've managed to get these programs up and running, I think, is what will help our endeavors, because it shows that we're not just creating things out of thin air and saying, oh, wouldn't this be fun? That we're really following serious policy that has been successfully enacted elsewhere. So you both have been very, very helpful. Do I have any questions or comments? Again, if you can't raise your hand, just yell. Anybody? Well, no. Apparently, you two did a lovely job explaining everything. So thank you very, very much for taking the time to join us today. That was
pleasure.
Incredibly helpful.
Yeah, our pleasure. I just one parting comment. I used to say to Laura, the vineyard is lucky. It has a crystal ball. It's called Nantucket. And the Cape has 2 crystal balls. Last year, the median home price here was $3.5 million. You needed to be earning 7 times the area median income. You don't want to get to this place. So it's always going to be cheaper to do it now than in the future.
Very true.
Agreed. And if I might just add to what Tucker said, this is it's a tricky political lift at state level. So the more unified our region looks, the more likely we are to get this. The seasonal communities designation recognized and acknowledged at state level that we have a different set of housing circumstances out here. That was a critically important piece of legislation, and we've got amazing tools to use. But there was originally $50 million of funding proposed as part of that package, and that funding got cut because that would have been state money coming to our region. And, there's not a lot of state money to go around right now. So what the transfer fee would effectively do is self-create the amount of revenue to fund these programs. And just as far as figures go, I really want to be clear about how much money the Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard Land Bank have taken in. Just last year, fiscal year 2024, the Martha's Vineyard Land Bank collected $14 million. That's just 1 year. So we're talking about a very large revenue stream. There would be more exemptions on the housing piece, but for the island alone, it would still take in $8 to $12 million annually, which could then be bonded. So we're talking about a really, really large revenue stream here.
Yeah, the Nantucket Land Bank has brought in $500 million since its inception in '84. The high water mark so far during the pandemic, they were bringing in $40 million a year. So, I mean, and maybe Michael touched on this again. I apologize if I missed it, but what's particularly valuable about this funding stream is that it can be bonded with. So you're really talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in the short term.
Thank you for pointing that out. I think it's helpful that it's coming from you too, and not from those of us that they just know how obsessed I am with getting housing. So it's better coming from people who have implemented it and have firm numbers. So again, thank you both very, very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next, I'm gonna throw this to Dan because he's a much better planner than I am. So, Delegate Gessen, do you have an idea of this committee and the the Assembly's next steps?
I think it makes sense for this committee to continue taking a leadership role on this, but I would also defer to Administrator Dutton if he's still on the call to get his thoughts on what might be a good timeline or a step-by-step approach for putting together an ordinance and a home rule petition.
Thank you, Chair. I can provide a little guidance there. I think it behooves, honestly, this committee to keep the Assembly informed. I mean, this is a very large initiative that several people have pointed out we haven't done before. So I think it does behoove us to make sure that we keep the Assembly informed completely about our actions. So I am happy to update. I know it's on the agenda, but I'm certainly happy to sort of report, what the working group has been doing and our thoughts, collective thoughts on this issue at your next meeting. By Wednesday, we will have had another working group meeting. So I will also have the opportunity to give a little bit more guidance in terms of what this committee could do. But I think, as I pointed out, if you want to take the next step, I think it involves a lot of discussion and a lot of guests to come in and sort of talk about what percentage you might be talking about in terms of collections through a transfer fee. If you're talking about 0.5% or 1%, what those percentages mean to the bottom line. You also want to talk about what kind of policy you want to have around exemptions. Is it the first million? Is it the first 2 million? That's a discussion I think that this committee should begin to have and try to flesh out some of that. So in terms of committee work, I mean, it really, a lot of this work falls, a lot of the political discussion, a lot of the political work really falls on this committee. And once you can make a recommendation, once you've galvanized and coalesced around a recommendation, you can bring that back to the full Assembly because it ultimately takes an Assembly vote to get this moving and to get a petition up to the legislature. But my role, I'm happy to work on drafts both for the petition and a potential ordinance, and I can work very closely with the committee to do that. So I think in terms of next steps, continue this discussion, probably ask some experts to come in. You might want to ask the Register of Deeds to come in and talk about just what kind of in a practical sense what kind of work would be required to add that additional transfer fee. I don't expect it's a lot, but you do want to keep the folks that would be right in the trenches sort of involved from the get-go. But again, I'm happy to assist along the way at the direction of the committee.
Thank you very much. And I'm feeling optimistic that we, as Delegate Tai said, we have a lot of work to do, but I'm feeling optimistic that we might be able to do it. Delegate Guess.
I think if we do have a chance to talk to the committee right now about what some next steps that made sense, one thing that popped out to me right now was it was super informative to have the folks in the island here to be able to speak to their experience. I'd be curious to maybe talk to the committee about some other people we might want to see come in front of the committee and answer questions. I know a couple that come to mind right away for me. Michael mentioned, Mr. Dutton mentioned the registry. They might also be able to present some numbers around what percentages would lead to what sort of revenue for different towns. So I think that would be helpful. And then I also see the reality that it's going to take an ordinance that needs to create the trust, if not the home rule petition. So we might want to open some kind of communication with the commissioners so that we're not catching them by surprise, and they feel like they have buy-in as well, so that we're not, we don't do all this work just to have it fall through for lack of communication. So maybe inviting, I know they can only do one at a time because of the quorum, but maybe possibly inviting them or a designee to come and speak on their thoughts would be the right thing to do. But I would be curious for other delegates too, like some other people that would make sense to invite.
Great. I think you're right. So we've gone over an hour, and but I want to thank everyone for coming. And I think, unless anybody has any other comments, I think we've done a lot of good work here, and you know, which we'll report to the full assembly on Wednesday, and then we'll see. You know, we'll have another meeting, hopefully, after we get feedback from the assembly about, you know, if they feel like we're moving in the right direction, but I certainly do. So, so if there's nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Mr. Clerk,
Would you like a roll call, Madam
I
Chair?
would like a roll call to adjourn. Thank you.
Deputy Speaker Gasson?
Yeah.
Chair Harder?
Yes.
Delegate Gallagher for Delegate Omen?
Yes.
Vice Chair, or actually Delegate Ty?
Yes.
Vice Chair Warner?
yes.
We are adjourned, ma'am.
Thank you very much, all of
Thank
you,
you. Thank
for
you.
coming and your fabulous participation.